don't bet on anyone else's experience. Bet on yourself. Go chase what you want to chase, and go capitalize on your own opportunities.
This is the Construction Veteran Podcast. Construction Veterans Podcast. Connecting and celebrating veterans in construction. Now, here's your host, Scott Friend.
Welcome back to the Construction Veteran Podcast. My name's Scott Friend. Guys, I'm excited about our first guest on the podcast. I'm going to be interviewing Dan Bradley, who's the CEO of CATI Striping and Coating here in Dallas, Texas. And Dan spent some time in special operations in the Air Force as well. Let's get into it. Mr. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Scott. How are you, man?
I'm great. Dan and I met recently through an industry contact, and he and I actually just met in person on one of my job sites last week. And man, it was like talking to an old friend. Dan, I don't know if you feel the same way. I really enjoyed it.
I gotta apologize. I think we had like a meeting starting on the hour, and I walked in like 20 minutes early.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I threw a little bit of wrinkle in your schedule. So I apologize for that.
Totally.
But
cool.
man, it's funny how it works, where you meet someone for the first time that you've got like shared background, shared experiences with, and you just hit it off. It's crazy.
Yep, I agree. I think a lot of that too is, service backgrounds. You find another vet, the mentality's fairly similar, I'd say.
Yeah.
So it's always a comfortable
it's almost
thing.
like it's like imbued in you, and you don't really realize it at the time, because when you get that put in you, it's also being installed or instilled in everybody else. It's not until after the fact that you realize that's something unique, and then when you come across someone who's got it too, it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So Dan, in my intro, I gave a little bit of info about what you did in the service, but go ahead and tell me about your service background.
Yeah, so I graduated the Air Force Academy in 2015, and commissioned as a lieutenant, went into the Tactical Air Control Party career field. So Tactical Air Control Party, the simplest way to describe it is you're the liaison between the pilot in the sky, who has the ability to strike targets on the ground, and the ground force commander, who is looking to achieve a specific outcome. So you're not just his right-hand man or his eyes and ears, but you're actually the guy who is directing that aircraft to support the ground mission. One of the most awesome and just powerful experiences I've ever had is being able to bring all those forces and all those capabilities that our Air Force has to bear for joint partners in real world situations. So truly grateful for all the experiences I had in the military. More so than anything, just the guys I got to work with. When I stepped into my first squadron as a second lieutenant, I was put in a position of a little bit of leadership, a little bit of responsibility, but I had still not been to the actual qualification schools to be what we call a JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, or someone who's actually certified to conduct airstrikes and close air support. I had guys way younger than me. I had guys with far less rank than I had, who took me under their wing and showed me how to do things the right way. Just really took care of me from day one. So, man, my experience in the military was I was only one thing. I was only a JTAC for all 5.5 or 6 years that I was in. But I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I loved every day of it.
I'll say this. You weren't just a JTAC, man. You should be proud of that. Let me get your take on this new Guy Ritchie movie. It seems like there's a lot of confusion about JTAC and TACP. What's your take on this movie? I don't know if it's come out yet. I don't think so.
I don't think it has. I've seen there's been a little bit of talk in the community about it. The movie itself, based on what I've seen, it's going to be a little bit politically charged, and there's some background that I'm not sure I have the right to get into, just in terms of what the movie was supposed to be when the idea came out, and what it's turned into, because it's two very different things. But so I'll put it this way. A JTAC is a qualification. Being a joint terminal attack controller or being able to conduct close air support is a qualification that you go out and get. It takes years to be able to be trusted with that responsibility of conducting close air support, and close not just in terms of what you're doing with the enemy on the ground, but what you're doing in terms of your team on the ground, keeping them safe while you're bringing lethal power to bear. But a JTAC is just that. It's a qualification. The Tactical Air Control Party is one of the career fields that now falls under Air Force Special Warfare, and it goes along with combat control, pararescue. Those career fields all have different specialties in and of themselves. So, like, my first thing is that I was a Tactical Air Control Party officer. I loved it. I'm very proud of being that, and I do miss it quite a bit. But JTACs, the qualification, exists across the spectrum of all the different services. So there are JTACs in the Navy, there are JTACs in the Army, there are other JTACs in other career fields in the Air Force. But in terms of Tactical Air Control Party, that was our bread and butter. That was really our thing. Took a lot of pride in it, trained to it every single day, and I'll say it unashamed. I think that we were the best at it.
Well, I just got an education, so I didn't know the difference either. So, I appreciate it. Do you think this is going to be like when they had Top Gun, the first Top Gun came out, and there was the Navy recruiters just had this bum rush of people. Everybody wanted to be a pilot or join the Navy. Do you think the Air Force is going to experience that?
The whole recruiting thing lately has been a little bit odd, right? Haven't seen much good news coming out of recruiters in terms of being able to find or attract qualified people, especially the best of the best, because that's really what you're searching for, is that cream of the crop. I hope so. I think more than anything, it's going to lead to education, because, not a lot of people outside of the military know what a JTAC is. Not a lot of people out of the military know what a CB is. Not a lot of people know what most of these things are. It's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that it is, right? So I hope that it gives a little bit more education on the different specialties that there are and the different kind of niches that exist within the military to kind of promote the development of that career field and other career fields similar to it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in this situation. If I wish I would have known then what I know now, because I honestly would have given that consideration, that career path. I think it's awesome. I knew nothing about it. I saw the guys when we were downrange, but I really didn't know about it. So, I want to transition into talking about what do you do now? So tell me when you transition out. This was 2018, I think we had discussed. What do you do now in the construction industry?
So a lot of steps to what I do now, and I think that's important for anyone who's coming out of the military and into any industry to acknowledge, is there's a lot of steps from what you do to what you're going to do. But right now, I'm proud owner of CATI Striping and Coating. We are a pavement marking company here in Dallas. We serve Dallas and Fort Worth for now, and we have expectations to serve Texas as a whole in the coming years. But extremely proud of our company and the guys that we've attracted, the guys that we've retained, the opportunities that we've given people, and the rate that we're growing. I never saw myself as a quote unquote entrepreneur. Never had any desire to be one, but couldn't really see myself doing anything but what I'm doing now.
I don't know what it is about the striping industry, but I had told you that you're the second guy in special operations I've met. There was a MARSOC guy who owned another striping company. I can't recall the name, but if he listens in, give me a shout. And he's a retired colonel. But tell me about how you got into that. You said you sort of fell into it. What does that mean?
Yeah, definitely fell into it. So when I left the military, I had super great timing in leaving the military. My wife and I were both active duty Air Force, and we both filed our paperwork to separate in late 2019. Now, this, leaving the military, it's not like dropping 2 weeks notice. It takes 6 months to a year. So as that process played out, the process of getting out of the military, everyone experienced 2020. Everyone experienced COVID. And right before COVID really became what it was, my wife and I were kind of riding high. We were excited about what was coming next for us. My wife had gotten a fantastic job offer up in Minneapolis, and we were so far down that path that we were getting ready to house hunt in Minnesota. Do you remember, like, there was a basketball game? I know it seems off track, but I promise it's not. There was a basketball game that was televised. It might have even been the Mavericks, where all the players are on the court getting ready to tip off, and someone runs out, and I guess a player had tested positive for COVID. They didn't say that to anyone in the arena. They just send the teams back to the locker rooms, cleared the arena, and that was almost like flipping a switch. Like, that was the start of COVID. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
So as that game was happening, my wife was packing to go up to Minnesota to take this job. And I don't know why these things happen in such a memorable way, but I remember talking to her and being like, I don't think you're going anywhere tomorrow. and lo and behold, she didn't.
Man, were you right? Golly.
Yeah, lucky guess, right?
Yeah.
So that sent us on a completely different trajectory of that job offer falling through, and really no opportunities being available. At the time when I was getting out of the military, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Construction wasn't even on my radar, not even close. I just didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the opportunities. I didn't know the culture. I didn't know. I knew so little about construction that when I actually got into it, the concept of a change order was confusing to me. So really just knew absolutely nothing about it at all. I was really, really lucky to have an opportunity to be placed with a company here in Dallas through an organization called the Talent War Group. Talent War Group is run by a guy named Mike Sorelli and Carly Walden, George Randall, all former military, and it was basically an executive search firm. I was given an opportunity to move here to Dallas and be a sales director for a commercial HVAC company. I was super grateful for the opportunity. I didn't know anything about the job. I didn't know anything about commercial HVAC. I didn't know anything about construction. I didn't know anything about sales. So it was quite a steep learning curve. All in all, after about a year at that company, I really didn't enjoy the culture. And it wasn't just the culture of the company. I wasn't jiving with the culture of construction. Trying to think of the right way to put this, but it just wasn't people taking care of people. And that was what I was accustomed to. That always struck me as what set TACPs apart from our conventional counterparts. Was we had a culture where we were able to compete with each other and able to push each other and able to grind alongside each other because it was for the benefit of each other, because it was people taking care of people at the end of the day. But I wasn't seeing that in anything that I did. And I was just very low on myself right around the 9 or 12 month mark of being in that role. I knew it wasn't meant for me. I knew I wasn't meant for it. And I reached out to a fantastic mentor that I have in the industry and basically grabbed lunch with him and said, I know that your company is culture driven. I haven't seen that anywhere else in construction. I'd love to learn more about your company. I really want to come to work for you. And he said, no, but I would love to support you and be your backbone and your foundation if we start another company to enter this industry and compete and help change the industry as a result. Before he even finished his sentence, I was on board. But my one stipulation was we have to do something so simple that we truly can focus on culture and focus on changing people's lives and pushing them to be better. Because if we're caught up in some of the more complex or more detail-oriented things in construction or in architecture or in anything, we're going to dedicate a ton of attention and focus to that, and we're not going to focus on what really matters to me right here, which is building a culture and believing that everything else will follow. we really couldn't think of anything that was more simple than the pavement marking industry. Done well, it's a fantastic thing. Done poorly, it's an awful thing. And you only notice it if it's done really poorly. So, I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If someone told me 5 years ago when I was a JTAC and enjoying every single day that, hey, 5 years from now you're going to paint parking lots for a living, I'm not sure how I would have received that news, but I'm thrilled with the opportunity that me and my company and my team have in front of us for changing people's lives and hopefully driving change in the industry as a result.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of things you said. So, and I totally agree with you. I've had this conversation that drywall is drywall, studs are studs, striping is striping, right? But it's the people and it's the relationships that really matter, and I think that's what makes the difference. So, I'm glad that you shared that you struggled a lot with that first company. Man, I think a lot of us experience that when we separate. I know I was shocked to be in the working world. I know one thing that shocked me was we're used to, unless you're working with very senior officers, you're used to people retiring out, late 30s, early 40s. So I got into the workforce and I saw guys in their 50s going, oh my gosh, they are so old. These dudes are ancient. And so it was such a shock. But one shock to me, and it sounds like you had a similar situation, people weren't taking care of each other. They would get mad when you didn't stay in your own lane and you tried to lend a hand. And I didn't get that. I don't understand that. And I think a lot of that is from our background that, hey, I don't care who you are. Even though it's not my title, I'm going to lend a hand. I'm going to support you. But sometimes it's not like that in our world, like the civilian world. I think it's getting better. But so how is your service, maybe specific to what you did in the Air Force, how has your service helped you, that specific job, and then maybe just the service as a whole? How has that helped you in what you're doing now?
Well, the way we started this conversation is when you're sitting with someone who has a background in the service, you can pick up on that pretty quickly. And I think there's a couple things that you're looking for. It's not just how they carry themselves or how they talk. It's not just it's a lack of ego, and like you said, the willingness to lend a hand to someone even if they're not asking for it. And I think that's something that we're taught very early on is, we've been in situations where ego will get you killed, or ego will get the wrong people killed. If you're not willing to hear out the room and understand that someone else's experience is beneficial to you rather than threatening to you, then you're really just, at least in the military, you're not just costing yourself, you're costing the people around you. And I mean, take the military. Never once in the military did I deal with anything financial or anything payroll based, right? It wasn't about money. You can Google salaries. There was no competition for salaries. You can look up a military pay scale right now in 10 seconds. So going and lending someone a hand, it wasn't like you're going to undercut them or you're going to subvert them in some way. You're there to do it to benefit them and benefit the team. I think in private industry, when things like that happen, it's like, that guy's coming for my job, that guy's coming for my promotion, that guy's coming for my whatever, and there is that dollar figure tied to it. So I think not just the ego associated with position, but the ego associated with pay and opportunity is a big reason that people say, hey, I get it, you're trying to help, stay in your own lane, I got this. Man, really just the culture of competition, and by competition I mean not trying to beat each other, but trying to best each other. Like, we competed every day, and I'm sure you've seen this too. When you're in the weight room, you know exactly what the guy next to you can lift because you've seen him lift it every day, and you've seen him show up early and improve himself and push himself further. And you know that he's looking at you just as much as you're looking at him, and you need to give him the assurance that I'm making myself better to benefit you as much as you're making yourself better to benefit me. I think that bringing that culture into the construction industry or into private industry in general is always going to be like, it's going to be met with some skepticism, because there is that level of competition as if we're all climbing different ladders. I feel like when you're hitched to a company, you're climbing the same ladder together, trying to create new opportunities for everyone, trying to build new programs that people can pursue, trying to build new relationships and new networks that people can benefit from. I hope that someday soon, private industry and construction specifically shifts that mentality of we're competing with each other to build projects to we're working alongside each other to accomplish something great for people.
No, I like that. The bigger picture, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
That says a lot to the service too. I mean, service is the same way. You're not you're part of this massive machine, but you're all moving towards the same goal. Hey, I want to touch on something you said too. So the Talent War Group, I'm somewhat familiar with them, but if we had somebody listening, maybe in transition or looking for work, tell me about what they do and how would somebody find them?
Yeah, so easiest way to find them, talentwargroup.com. Mike Sorelli has written a couple of fantastic books. The first one is named actually The Talent War, and so easy to remember there. I think he's coming out with something along those lines or along the lines of Everyday Warrior that's similar to that, and that's also something that Mike does regularly with, I think, Men's Health Magazine. He's got a regular column with them. So plenty of opportunities to go search out the Talent War Group, Mike Sorelli, Carly Walden, George Randall, and what they do. What they did for me was take me from a guy who didn't know anything about the job hunt, about separating from the military, or about what it's like to get out, and put me in a position where I was comfortable with it. Not an expert at it. I think that's something that needs to be spoken to as well, the whole concept of an expert military transition, whatever, because I think that's the biggest load of BS you can ever find. But they gave me solid footing. They helped me feel as if I was good enough to get out and succeed. Because when you're getting out of the military, you do find a lot of that crabs in a bucket mentality, people trying to pull you back down, people telling you it's scary out there. And let's be real, it is. When you're an adult who's never been anything but in the military, and then you go leave it to enter the world that everyone else entered when they were 18, there is an intimidation factor. But what they did for me was give me the skills and the background and the expertise necessary to go out and be confident in myself and my own skills and my own capabilities and my own background to go crush the rest of my life. So truthfully, those guys, they gave me not just that, they gave me fantastic connections to benefit from. I'm proud to be listed as a contributor for the Talent War Group. And man, there's nothing I have in my life, none of the opportunities that I have in my professional life, I wouldn't have any of them had it not been for the Talent War Group.
That's awesome. And I mean, good for you also for really getting after it. I think a lot of people transition out and expect, I hate to say it, the service really does everything for you, right? They say if you're in the right place, right time, right uniform, you're good, you're covered. You know, you're fed, you got a place to live. But I think a lot of folks, when they transition, they don't really pick up and go, hey, I got to be self-sufficient now. So kudos to you for doing that.
It's weird, isn't it? I don't mean to cut you off, but it's so
Sure.
weird that, like, yeah, you're right, man. You are coddled when you're in the military. Like, I got out in my late 20s and was curious about the concept of a mortgage because I had moved so frequently that I had never done anything but rent, which is like sign 3 papers, right? So didn't understand the concept of a mortgage. Definitely didn't understand the concept of health insurance or how that's taken out of your salary.
Oh yeah, everything's
Didn't
free.
understand anything. Well, yeah, it's just there, right? I just got to go talk to my senior leader, and I can go get whatever I need done. Not that it's done well, but different conversation.
You get what you pay for, right?
Right. But no, man, in general, like, you are coddled in the military, and that gives a lot of people this entitled mentality when they're getting out, that they're going to get handed something because they're special. It doesn't matter what your job title is or what you think your job translates to in the quote unquote real world. man, that's not the way any of this works. And I hope people don't fall into that trap, or fall into the trap of thinking that there's something. There's really this industry that's been built up around people separating from the military, and it's wild to me that people advertise themselves as military transition experts who will get you that dream job and X, Y, and Z. Just sign the dotted line, and they'll help you get to where you want to be. Anyone who's gotten out of the military, not anyone, but for the most part, has gotten out of it one time. And you can't be an expert at anything getting out of it one time. But not only that, don't bet on anyone else's experience. Bet on yourself. Go chase what you want to chase, and go capitalize on your own opportunities. Sorry, I know that's a little bit of a soapbox outside of where you're going. But
no, you just gave me a really sweet soundbite. Was all I appreciate. It's true. No, I love that. And man, I know you're going to ruffle some feathers with one of your comments. You said that people basically have to be humble. And you had said something to the effect that they're going to get out there and they think, oh, I did this. This was my job. This was my title. We had this conversation that, they might be getting out as maybe a sergeant major or a master sergeant. Well, yeah, you were in charge of all this stuff while you were in, but depending on the industry that you're trying to get into, you might not get into that top dog role. You might have to work your way up. So you might have to humble yourself a little bit.
Oh, yeah, dude. Ruffle those feathers all day. Like, someone's got to tell him.
No, I love it. It's true.
It hurts to hear, but it's true. You're not going to step out of being fantastic at whatever you did in the military and step into being fantastic at whatever you're pursuing in private industry. And I know there's all these people who will tell you, oh, you were a flight commander. Okay, well that translates to director level experience. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. It just doesn't. There's a couple of catch-alls, like everyone thinks they've got project management experience. Everyone thinks they've got consulting experience. You don't, man. Go humble yourself. Go be something that you can learn from, and you can increase your experience from, and increase your capacity from, and just work your way up. I'm not saying humble yourself to being nothing, but you're starting over. You don't get to go from being an E6 or an O6 and all of a sudden just step into a leadership role somewhere else. There's a pecking order to everything. You got to climb that totem pole.
Yeah, it's true, man. Another reason I was really excited to have you on too is, my background. I was in construction in the service, and so I kind of stepped into it. I didn't really change my job much. I mean, really, I'm just kind of leading more people and doing bigger jobs than I did in the service. But you had a completely non-related. You weren't even an engineer in the service. You got in going from special operations into this. So let's take a step back. Let's say we're 5 years ago. You're about to get out, or 5+ years ago, and you had your pick of the litter of what industries to join. Do you think you would end up in this same industry, and why or why not?
Oh, if knowing what I know now, or just with Dan the way he was?
Let's try both.
Dan the way he was, man, like I said, not on my radar. Had no intention of going into construction. And I think there's a huge opportunity for construction to capitalize on reaching out to veterans. Tell me
the misconception you had. You shared that with me the other day. What did you think construction was when you were still in?
Ditch diggers and flag guys, man. And it's weird because you go through this military transition process, and you go through a couple of mandated programs because Congress actually mandated certain programs to get out to, I guess, in an effort to decrease veteran homelessness or underemployment or unemployment, whatever it may be. Some people find value in them. Some people don't. The only thing I remember from mine is like construction was the bottom of every rung. It was like, if you fail at these 8 things, you can go into construction. And that was my perception because I didn't know any better. And, for you, first of all, saying that you were in construction in the military is a highly humble way of describing what a Navy CB is. So you guys do a whole heck of a lot more than that. But you had that background. The rest of us really didn't. Anyone who's not a CB or an engineer has no idea what they're talking about. So Dan, the way he was, no concept of it. Not even on my radar. knowing what I know now, as opposed to even what I knew 2 years ago when I was getting my introduction to construction, or 3 years ago when I was getting my introduction to construction. And I've fallen in love with this industry because of the opportunity that's present to help people. I don't see any other industry where you can take people who have very few opportunities in front of them, who are looking for, I mean, man, you can take a guy who's either a first-generation American or a guy who is coming out of prison entrepreneurship program or a guy who's coming out of homelessness or addiction or whatever it may be, and you can bring them up, give them a fresh start in construction, and elevate them to, there's no cap. Like, the opportunity to change lives in construction made me fall in love with it. And I mean, I don't see myself being in any industry but construction for the rest of my life. I wish I could go back and tell Dan when he was getting out that that's the case, but I also think Dan, when he was getting out, would laugh at that. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely has a bad rep, right? I think I shared that story with you that one of the older superintendents I used to work with, the guy started out in a halfway house. He started out as a laborer, and now he's running multi-million-dollar jobs. So there's opportunity out there for anybody from any background. I'm going to challenge something you said. I'll be bold enough to say that I don't know if it's just this industry. I think veterans, they're very successful in a lot of industries just because of that mindset of taking care of other people. So there are other industries out there. Obviously, you and I are very partial to ours. Coming from the service, yeah, right. Coming from what we did, I think guys with this mindset could go into almost any industry and just have that carry that motivation through. And we've probably both run across some knuckleheads in the service. I'm certainly not saying that about every veteran by any means, but I think construction gives people that opportunity. You get thrown into the deep end sometimes, or you ask for more, you're going to get more, and you can be very successful. So I said on my first episode that I don't think people realize that guy digging a ditch sometimes is doing pretty well. And I've run into guys that are maybe self-performed carpenters, and you would think they're doing the really tough jobs. And these aren't young guys. These are guys that have been doing it a long time, but they're doing the really tough, laborious jobs, and they're putting their kids through college. They've got a nice home. They're doing okay for themselves. So construction certainly gets a bad rep. But let me ask you this. So it sounds like you would definitely come back into the industry. I agree. Same with me. I love what we do. A lot of opportunity to make an impact on people. If you were to go back and change anything along this journey, though, whether that's in the Air Force or in what you're doing now, do you think you would change anything at all?
Oh, man. I wish I was more humble about it. I think that's why I feel comfortable telling people to be humble about it, because I failed at that. But aside from that, man, I'm grateful that I got to make mistakes along the way. If I hadn't gotten the opportunity to make mistakes along the way, I wouldn't have learned the lessons along the way. And if someone had just told me all the things I know now to be true about this industry, I wouldn't have taken them at face value. So aside from just humbling myself and being willing to accept that there are levels to this and there is a process to this and it's important to follow that process, not by any means saying I didn't make mistakes that I don't regret, or made decisions that I don't wish I could take back, because I do. But wouldn't change them because I'm more so grateful for the lessons that came out of that.
Good, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Let me ask you this. Well, you say people need to be humble. Dude, you're a very humble guy. I mean, you're probably not going to want to take this compliment, but I told you I listened to that Lessons from the Front podcast. So that's the Carry the Load podcast for anybody who's listening. And Dan goes into some great detail about a really rough time in the service. So I would encourage people to go listen to that. It's called Lessons from the Front. And dude, you were so humble about what you experienced. And I appreciate you sharing that. I kind of went through a similar situation in our industry about wanting to get out. I'm switching lanes here, but you had said you were just done with the industry, and I've been there too, man. And if there's somebody else in the industry right now that thinks, hey, this isn't for me, if there's another vet out there, what would you say to them to try to encourage them to stick with it?
Man, it's all about the people that you surround yourself with. And I mean, so when I was looking at getting out of the industry, and Scott, I don't know exactly what your situation was or situations were when you were looking at that, but what got me was twofold. Not only am I not being taken care of, but I'm being denied opportunities to take care of other people. The real rut I found myself in was that the organization I was with and the culture that I was in was surrounding themselves with similar people with similar mindsets and similar cultures, because we all run in tribes, right? So it was twofold: what I was seeing internally and how we handled ourselves, and what I was seeing externally, how we handled ourselves with others and how they handled themselves with us, because those types of people attracted each other. And moving forward into another, not just company, into another network, into another set of contacts, it was, man, night and day. Change your surroundings. It's a tough process to do. It's certainly an intimidating process to go through, but I mean, there are people who will help you get to where you want to be, surrounded by people who have the same mindset as you in terms of taking care of people, in terms of building a culture, who will help you help other people, and in return, take care of you as well. It's really just your surroundings, and that's not a shot at anyone. Everyone does business in their own way. Everyone builds their own cultures. I'm not going to sit here and say that my company has the greatest culture ever, even though, like I said, that's really all I care about. But we have our shortcomings too. But surround yourselves with people who at least have that mindset, who are willing to make sacrifices to the bottom line to benefit culture and help them reap the benefit of that investment.
No, that's good. One thing I want to add to that too, you hear people talk about knowing your worth, and I think as vets, we think, well, hey, what I'm doing now, I just got to keep working at it, and you have the freedom to leave, and we didn't have that
right
in this service. I've jumped around companies over the last 12 or so years of doing this on the commercial side, and I've been with some really awesome companies. I landed where I'm at now. I've got an amazing team, and I've been with some really bad companies. One of them's not even in business anymore, but I wasn't afraid to step up and say, hey, look, I'm not being treated right. And it wasn't an arrogance thing. It was just this is not okay what we're doing. And I decided, well, this isn't healthy for me and my family. So I would encourage other vets that if it just doesn't seem like a right fit, that's okay to look somewhere else. And people get scared. I think there's this misconception that if you jump around companies for a bit in the early years of your career, that's going to look bad. But man, I would say the vast majority, if you look at a lot of executives or vice presidents, folks in that role, a lot of them jumped around early on in their career until they made that, hey, this is where I'm going to stick for 25 years. A lot of them did the same thing. So people, it's fine to do that. I'll even say when I was being interviewed for my current job, I brought it up. I said, well, I know I've got a couple different places I've been. I'm sure that's the elephant in the room. My boss now, he said, I don't care about that. You've got a lot of experience. So that's what he cared about. It was me as a person. So we've got a great team. So let's I'm going to wrap it up here with my last question here. If you got a veteran that's transitioning out of the service right now, some guy or girl listening to the podcast, what would you want to say to them if they were transitioning out of the service about the industry? And we've touched on it a little bit to encourage them to join this. I mean, I'll say we need people that are younger in the industry for sure. So that's part of the point of this podcast. But what would Dan say to them?
Well, I think it falls back in line with something that you and I talked about just the other day is, you know, in the military, and this is the thing that I missed so much when I got out. Aside from just the people itself, I think the thing I missed most was a mission-oriented mentality. And, we spend a probably inordinate amount of time in the military planning for things that are not certain and coming up with secondary and tertiary and alternate plans to continue the mission when things don't go our way. Because there's always those external factors that are going to prevent your plan from doing what you think it's going to do. What was it, Tyson, who said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face?
Yeah, that's right.
And we all get punched in the face on every mission. It's the only thing that's certain. That skill in and of itself, to understand that a plan is just that, it's a plan, it's not reality, and you're going to need to make calls on the fly that allow the plan to change while still accomplishing the same mission, as long as it's still in line with the commander's intent. That skill alone will make you incredibly successful in construction. It's not like that skill is exclusive to the military, right? There are plenty of people who have not been in the military who still have that capacity. But a far greater percentage of people who have a military background have that capacity than people who do not have a military background. When you're going through that process of transitioning out, you're going to be asked, put your military experience in terms that other people will understand so that they will know what you did. That right there is what you did. You turned bad situations into good ones and still accomplished missions and were successful in them under less than ideal circumstances. That is what we do in construction. Yeah.
Less than ideal, that's putting it lightly. You're not going to be getting shot at on the job site, I hope. Depends on where your project is, right?
Usually.
Yeah. Well, brother, hey, Dan.
That's all we do, man. That's what we do to continue to win. And if you can do that there, you can do that here. I promise.
Yeah, man, you gotta have the grit.
Grit, great word.
Yep, brother. I've appreciated the time. I really appreciate you taking this time with me. I still owe you a cigar, so that's gonna happen soon. Man, yes, Dan is becoming a famous guy around Dallas-Fort Worth. You're on all kinds of podcasts now, so hopefully we work together soon. If you guys want to get a hold of Dan, how can we reach out to you, Dan, whether it's for business or personal? What's a good way to get a hold of you?
Man, first and foremost, appreciate what you're saying. Famous is a little much, but as a guy who's not been a podcast guy at any time in my life, I think there's one podcast, and it's the 1720 podcast that I listen to regularly. It's just been fun to be on and be able to share stories. Go to our website, catistriping.com. CATI is spelled CATI, or for those with a phonetic background, Charlie Alpha Tango India. It stands for Come and Take It.
I love it.
You're not a Texas company without a little bit of Texas history.
I love it.
catistriping.com, and you can always reach me via email, dbradley@catistriping.com. Always happy to talk to someone who's either a listener to this awesome podcast or who's just looking for opportunities in this industry. We can go crush it together.
Awesome, Dan, man. I appreciate your time, and we will chat soon.
I appreciate you, Scott. Thanks for the opportunity, man.
All right, man. If you're a military veteran in the construction industry, or you're in the construction industry and support our military vets, and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can find me at constructionvetpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me there at Scott Friend. Let's share the stories and motivate others.